Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to EduSat Live Lectures. Dear friends, as you know that we've started a series on sustainable development goals and today we're conducting yet another lecture in the same series. In today's lecture, we will try to understand the concept of gender equity and equality. To discuss this topic, we have with us our subject expert, Professor Sudesh Nangia. Professor Nangia is National Coordinator of UGC Faculty Recharge Program. She was also formerly Professor at Center for Study of Regional Development, School of Social Sciences, JNU, New Delhi. Without further ado, I would like to welcome ma'am to our studios and request her to start the lecture. Welcome ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon everybody. As Madam has suggested, I am going to talk something about gender equity and equality. Before I start, I would just like to quote Mahatma Gandhi, who had been quite conscious about the status of women in society. And way back in 1929, in his paper on Young India, and later in 1938, he said, "I should treat daughters and sons on a footing of perfect equality. I fail to see any reason for jubilation over the birth of a son, mourning over that of a daughter. Both are God's gifts. They have an equal right to live and are equally necessary to keep the world going." That shows that the efforts towards gender equity and equality have been going on in this country right from the last century. I shall briefly organize the discussion into 4 parts. One part is on issues of concern related to gender equity and equality in teaching and research. Second, how gender has been viewed in our national 5-year plans. Third, what kind of legislative measures have been introduced since independence to strengthen gender equity and equality. Fourth, what are the concerns expressed by our parliamentarians in this regard? Taking the first, now this basically relates to teaching and research. What are the basic issues of concern? They can be basically divided into demographic, socio-cultural and economic issues. Amongst the demographic, of course, there are several, but here when we discuss about them, we'll just take some examples so that the concern for the gender issues is highlighted. In the demographic issues, for instance, we talk about the sex ratio, fertility. Infertility, total fertility rate, crude birth rate, infant maternal age-specific fertility rate. Then we take the issues of mortality, where we take married mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, infant mortality rate, child mortality rate, etc. Then we are also concerned with the issues of migration, especially related to women again, rural to rural migration, rural to urban migration, urban to urban migration, internal migration within the country and international migration. For instance, we know that when we take the issue of migration in rural to rural, there is dominance of female migration. Then we try to find out the reasons for such migration, and as we know that in rural to rural, it's basically the marriage migration that dominates. And once we come to the urban migrations, then the other issues of education, employment, associational migration, etc., they come into operation. Then there's a question of expectation of life at birth, which is again an issue related to the male-female expectation, which is dependent upon several socio-economic factors in society. The next issues are socio-cultural, where we take literacy, that is the basic knowledge of reading and writing, education, level of education. We also take into account the skill education, son preference, which is very dominant in many of the societies, marriage and divorce and its repercussions on family life, on the life of women, aging and widowhood, especially as we know at a later stage, one of the partners may not be there to look after the other partners. So we have the question of widowhood and how widows are surviving during their last ages. The violence against women, safety and security of women, and female-headed households. These are some of the main issues which are being taken up for teaching and research in the socio-cultural dimensions of gender equity and equality. The next group of issues relates to the economic factors. Here, basically, we find that the studies have concentrated on work participation rate of women, the holdings of assets, the property rights, employment, new avenues for employment, and the protection which is given to women in the process of employment. Now, taking one example of sex ratio. Sex ratio basically we take as, in the Indian census, we take as female per thousand male population. We have the data available from census right from 1901. Here is a graph that gives us the picture. See, if we look at 1901, we had 972 female per thousand male. But the graph shows that there has been a steady decline right up to 1971, with a slight variation in 1951, where it was registered as 946. So there has been a slight increase to 934 in 1981, and after that there has been a decline in 1991, and there is a gradual increase in 2011. But starting from 1901, when there were 972 female per thousand male, in 2011 we find that there are only 940 female per thousand male. So this is basically a cause of concern for us. Here we present some of the statistics. If we look at the sex ratio of some of the states which had more than 1,000 female per thousand male in 1951, we find that most of them have shown decline. Bihar, for instance, in 1951 had 1,000 female per thousand male, and the figures reduced to 918 in 2011. So likewise, Manipur, Mizoram, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Daman and Diu, Goa, Lakshadweep, they all have shown a decline in sex ratio between 1951 and 2011. Kerala, of course, has shown an increase, and so has Pondicherry. Overall, the sex ratio in India was 946, got reduced to 940 in 2011. But that also again shows how the sex ratio in certain states which had sex ratio over 1,000 has also declined during this period. This is state of art which we are discussing. This is one example which I have taken from demography, sex ratio. Now we take education, socio-cultural. Here we will just take the literacy rate because that is the data which is universally available right up to the village level for census right from 1951. Now here we take the all India figures. We find that the literacy rate in the beginning of the last century was very low in our country. 5.35% of the population was literate. While the male literacy was 9.83, the female literacy was very marginal, less than 1%, 0.6. And there was a male-female gap in literacy rate to the tune of 9.23. The literacy rate has gradually gone up from 1901 to 2011, as you would see in the figures, from 5.35 to 63.07. While the male literacy has gone up to almost 70%, the female literacy is 56%. The male-female gap in literacy is still 13.79, which is almost 14%. So there is still inequality between the male and female literacy even till 2011. Now let's look at the literacy rate of India. This literacy rate is calculated based on taking 0 to 6, excluding 0 to 6 population from the figures. Now here we find that in 1951, 18.3% of the population was literate, and the figures gradually increased to 74% in 2011. Of this, if we look at the male literacy, that has increased from 27% to 82%. The female literacy has gone up from almost 9% to 65%. The gap between the male and female literacy still persists. It was 18.3 in 1951, increased to 25, then 24, 26, again 25, 12, and in 2011 the literacy gap is 16.68%, which is almost 17%. So we find that inequality still exists even in terms of literacy rate. Now here we have some statistics which show the number of girls per 100 boys enrolled in India between 1990-91 to 2013-14, which gives us some idea of the gap which exists between the two. The figures are available to us for primary, upper primary, secondary, senior secondary and higher education. We start with an example of primary education. In 1991, 71% of the girls per 100 boys, 71 girls per 100 boys were enrolled in primary education, and this figure over the years has increased and the gap has considerably reduced in 2012-13, where we have 94% girls per 100 boys. There is a slight decline in 2013-14, but this could be on account of some reasons which we are not able to explain. In the upper primary classes, that is class 6 to class 8, also the number of girls has gone up from 58 to 95 per 100 boys in this class group. Taking the secondary level, in secondary also, the figures have gone up from 63 in 2000-2001 to 90. In the senior secondary, it has gone up to from 49 to 89. And in higher education, it has gone up from 46 to 81. What is interesting to notice that all along the number of girls per 100 boys enrolled is reducing as we go up to the higher education. So from 94 in 2012-13 in case of primary to it has gone to 81 in higher education. Figures are slightly better in case of upper primary, that is 95. But after that the figures are reducing. That really shows that not as many girls are going in for higher education as the boys. Now we come to the third dimension, and that is the work participation rate of male-female in India and what is the male-female gap there. Now these statistics are again from census for 4 decades. 1981, the male participation had been 52.7%, almost 53% we can say, while female participation had been 20%. So there's a gender gap of 33%, 33. In 1991, it was 29.3. In 2001, it was 26.1. In 2011, again the gender gap is around 27.8. So that shows that the gender gap, though slightly reduced, but still there is considerable gender gap in the work participation rate of male and female in our country. So which points towards an inequality. Now here we have for some states, we give an example of some states highlighting the gender gap in work participation rate. For the country as a whole, the total participation rate in 2001 is 39%, and for 2011 it's almost 40%, 39.8. For male it's 52% we would say, and female 26%. So gender gap is 26 in 2001, but in 2011 it has gone up to 27.7%. Taking the states, we find that gender gap in some of the states has gone up during this period. For instance, in Assam, it has gone up from 29 to 31. In Goa, it has gone up from 32 to 35. In Kerala, it has remained almost constant. In Manipur, it has reduced. In Mizoram, it has gone up again. Nagaland, it has slightly reduced. Rajasthan is considerably reduced, but in Dadra and Nagar Haveli, it has gone up considerably. So there are fluctuations. In Lakshadweep, it has reduced, and in Pondicherry, again, it has gone up. So that shows that there are fluctuations. In certain cases, there are slight fluctuations, but overall, the gap still remains between the male and female. Now, we come to the next issue, and that is gender equality, the way it has been approached in the 5-year plan. In fact, our state has been very conscious of bringing both men and women at par right from the freedom movement days, and the moment we had the 5-year plans, this process was initiated. Now, in the first 5-year plan, which started in 1951, the approach was to provide the welfare of women so that they could play a legitimate role in family and community. So, the first family planning program was introduced in 1952. Central Social Welfare Board was set up in 1953, and role of NGOs for welfare activities related to women was promoted through Central Social Welfare Board. In the second to fifth 5-year plan, the general approach was to promote the welfare of women, and it continued. There were condensed courses of education for women. There were certain socio-economic programs highlighted for women. Working girls' hostels were established, and there were short-stay home schemes. In the sixth 5-year plan, the sixth 5-year plan laid emphasis on 3 sectors. That was basically health, education, and employment. Priority was given to women working in agriculture and its allied activities, that is dairying, poultry, animal husbandry, small-scale industry. Women's employment program was initiated. Priority in 7th 5-year plan was given to education and employment of women. There were 2 schemes which were started. One was support to training and employment program, and then awareness generation program for rural and poor women. They were introduced. There were some reports which are prepared. For instance, where the report of the National Commission on Self-Employed Men and Women in Informal Sector, we studied the plight of women in the informal sector and suggested ways and means to ameliorate them. A plan was prepared on the National Perspectives Plan on women. Then a SARC guidebook was prepared on women and development. In the 8th 5-year plan, which was from 90 to 95, 2 new schemes were introduced to ensure that benefits of development do not bypass the women. One was Indira Mahila Yojana, which related to microfinance scheme for women and organizing them into self-help groups. Second was Mahila Smridhi Yojana. Then National Commission of Women was set up. National Credit Fund for Women was set up. And another remarkable achievement of this program was, of this plan was, that 2 amendments were made in the Constitution, that is, which are known as 73rd and 74th Amendments, whereby 1/3 of the seats in the rural and urban governing institutions for women were reserved. In the 9th 5-year plan, which is from 1997 to 2002, the empowerment of women became the prime objective. Thus, a national policy for the empowerment of women was adopted. Women's component plan was adopted, whereby not less than 30% funds were to be earmarked in all women-related sectors. And basic issues which related to women's empowerment were social and economic empowerment of women, training, employment and education of women, attitudinal change towards the girl child, providing support services to women, and identifying women's rights and the laws, establishing laws. If we take now the 10th 5-year plan, which was between 2002-2007, the focus was on empowering women and to promote gender equity. This approach is to continue with the major strategy of empowering women as agents of social change and development. Besides, there was an attempt to adopt a sector-specific 3-fold strategy for empowering women based on the prescriptions of the National Policy for Empowerment of Women. They included, first, social empowerment, that is, to create an enabling environment through various affirmative developmental policies and programs for development of women, besides providing them easy and equal access to all the basic minimum services so as to enable them to realize their full potentials. Second was economic empowerment, that is, to ensure provision of training, employment and income generation activities with both forward and backward linkages, with the ultimate objective of making all potential women economically independent and self-reliant. And third was gender equality, that is, to eliminate all forms of gender discrimination and thus allow women to enjoy all the de jure, not only the de jure but also the de facto rights and fundamental freedom on par with men in all spheres, that is, political, economic, social, civil, cultural, etc. In the 11th 5-year plan, between 2007-2012, the key gender-based objectives were to reduce gender gap in literacy to 14%, to eliminate gender disparity in elementary education, to reduce maternal mortality ratio to 125 per lakh live births, to reduce anemia among women and girls by 50% by the end of the 11th plan, to raise the sex ratio for age group of population between 0 to 6 by 2016-17, to ensure that at least 33% of the direct and indirect beneficiaries of all government schemes are women and girl children, to empower women through their socio-economic development and increase their participation in decision making on matters that directly affect them, and to strengthen the pro-poor focus in resource planning and allocation by building capacity in gender budgeting. In the 12th 5-year plan, we are still running through and we are about to complete this plan now. The objectives are faster, more inclusive and sustainable development, to eliminate gender gap and social gap in school enrollment, to reduce maternal mortality ratio to 100 per lakh live births, to improve child sex ratio, that is between the 0 to 6 age group, to 950 female per 1000 male, and focus on women and children health, that is ICDS program to be revamped. Thank you. In this session, we shall now talk about the legislative measures which have been introduced from time to time since our independence towards gender equity. The backbone of all legislative measures and policies is the Constitution of India that came into force in 1950. The preamble reads, India as a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic that secures justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity to all citizens. There's no discrimination on account of gender. 1992, 73rd and 74th Amendments to the Constitution confer constitutional validity on urban and rural local government institutions and reserves 1/3 seats in these bodies for women. Besides, women should also fill a proportion of chairperson's position. In 1984, district family courts were established to expedite the settlement of disputes related to marriage and family affairs, and family court judge was preferably to be a female. In 1987, we had Legal Services Authorities Act, which provided free legal aid to underprivileged groups, including women. In 1953, Central Social Welfare Board was established. The function of this board was to mobilize voluntary organizations for social welfare services, especially for women and children. This board had the networking of 20,000 voluntary organizations. In 1992, National Commission for Women was established. The task of this National Commission for Women is to review existing laws and suggest reforms in existing laws to include issues of gender therein. In 2002, we had the National Health Policy. The objective of this policy is to realize acceptable standard of good health among the general population, to reduce maternal mortality rate to 100 per lakh by 2010 to reduce IMR to 30 per thousand by 2010 to reach basic health services to women. Besides, in 1994, we had preconception and pre-diagnostic technique, that is Prohibition of Sex Determination Act, which was amended in 2003, is a further step towards women empowerment, is a first step to save the girl child and to raise the status of women and the girl child. On International Women's Day 2003, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare initiated a program to compensate pregnant women for their travel costs to health center, providing a token gift of Rs 500 on the birth of a son and Rs 1,000 on the birth of a daughter. In 2003, Jeevan Bharti Insurance Scheme was launched by LIC, which was meant exclusively for women between the age group of 18 to 50 years. Prime Minister announced the grant of Rs 6,000 on the eve of New Year 2017 for all pregnant women for nutrition and safe delivery. We have some other policies and programs of the Government of India which give us an idea of how successively they have tried to improve the status of women to reduce gender equality. We have 1971 Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. Of course, I will not be able to go into details of all these acts, but then the title itself speaks of what kind of measures are to be taken under these programs. 1975 Integrated Child Development Scheme, 1993 National Nutrition Policy, 1996 we had Committee Against Sexual Harassment at Workplace. Famous Vishakha judgment came up for this. 2000 we had National Population Policy, 2001 National Policy for Empowerment of Women, 2012 National AIDS Prevention and Center Policy, 2013 the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. These policies and programs are meant to provide women with reasonable health status, family status, empowerment and gender equity. Besides, India had been a signatory to several international laws and treaties for ensuring a better status for women in society. 1971, we had Alma Ata Declaration's goal of health for all by the year 2000. 1971, we had Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. India is a state party to it. 1994, we had International Conference on Population and Development Program of Action. 1995, Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. 2000, United Nations Millennium Development Goals. India is committed to these goals. 2016, they have been now changed to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and India is again bound to, committed to achieve these goals. Now, these are some of these concerns which are highlighted here to show how there have been attempts made to improve the status of women. Now we come to the fourth part, which is basically what are the parliamentary concerns on gender equity and equality. You know that after every 5 years we have elections, we have old parliamentarians, we have new parliamentarians, they all have their concerns expressed to raise the status of women. Now, this is a study, these observations are based on a study which has been conducted by Indian Association of Parliamentarians on Population and Development. The specific objectives of this analysis are to know about the major concerns of elected representatives in respect of population issues, to identify gaps in their awareness and knowledge of population-related issues, with a view to incorporate those in their training modules and to identify those members of parliament who are deeply concerned about the gender issues in population and health and in other aspects. They will then be approached for intensive training so that they are better able to advocate the cause of population both in parliament and in their respective constituencies and become resource persons for future training of parliamentarians. The Indian Association of Parliamentarians on Population and Development decided to analyze the questions directed to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. The analysis of questions raised in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha between 2000 to 2016 has been incorporated in this particular observation. We found that nearly 15,000 questions were asked during this period related specifically to the issues which we are discussing, and their answers we analyzed in this exercise. Considering the variety of questions that was on several topics, the questions were telescoped into these categories. 1. Population policy, national health policy, population growth and family planning, health care, rural and urban, reproductive and child health, including infant, child and maternal mortality, morbidity, HIV AIDS, financial allocation for health programs, including external assistance, expenditure on health programs, role of NGOs, corporate sectors. The analysis indicates that population problems continue to be the major concern among parliamentarians, where gender bias and gender discrimination came up as special areas of focus. Sterilization was one of the major concerns, basically because of the lack of apathy for the lives of women as reflected in Bilaspur tragedy of 2014. Members of parliament have also realized the need to adopt a population policy which is more gender sensitive. The parliamentarians strongly feel that there is a need to strengthen the health care infrastructure, both physical and manpower, to reduce the incidence of maternal and infant mortality, both in the rural and the urban areas. Parliamentarians have also shown keen interest in reproductive and child health issues, as number of questions were raised on maternal and infant mortality rate, morbidity, undernourishment, malnourishment among women, immunization, health care infrastructure, sexual and reproductive health, and health rights of the women. Reproductive tract disease and menstrual hygiene, provision of quality sanitary napkins in rural areas, creating awareness on the need to maintain menstrual hygiene have been important concerns of parliamentarians. In the HIV AIDS, the concern has been more on children and their rehabilitation, as they are the sufferers on account of one or both of their parents. The concern to make the sex determination test mandatory, to keep track on pregnant women and to provide them with adequate nourishment have also been deliberated. There has been a sincere concern on the question of sex ratio, especially in the states where this problem is acute. Now we sum up on a positive note in the sense that the data suggests that the male-female gaps are reducing, though its pace is slow. There are few states that have crossed the threshold. There are few societies that have crossed the threshold, but there are many who are yet to cross the education, employment, and threshold barriers and health barriers. Diversified legislative measures have been taken in the field of fertility, mortality, financial powers, education, employment, and political representation, and the results are indeed encouraging. Many states have implemented these measures while many have to still achieve these objectives. These concerns have been reflected by parliamentarians very vociferously as we look at the number of questions which have been addressed to the parliament during the gap during the 16 years. Now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 5 states that we have to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Now, it has several targets. Target 1 is end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. Target 2, eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. Target 3, eliminate all harmful practices such as child marriage, early marriage, forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. Target 4, recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally appropriate. Undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property, financial services, inheritance, and natural resources in accordance with national laws. Next target is enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communication technology, to promote the empowerment of women. Target 5 is to adopt and strengthen sound policies and enforcement and enforce legislations for the promotion of gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in all levels. There have been several recent initiatives which have been introduced. One is that recently our Prime Minister has announced an additional benefit of rupees 6,000 maternity benefit for covering hospital admissions, vaccinations, and nutrition food for the mothers. The Maternity Benefit Act aims, which has been introduced, it aims to raise the maternity leave for women from 12 to 26 weeks. Besides, now women are also entitled to get 2 years of child care leave up to the age of 18 years for children. In many of the states, the local bodies have representation of 50% of women. 50% has been reserved for women, such as Bihar, and more states are coming forward to introduce the same. Then there has also been, there are several openings, new openings for women. For instance, we have been hearing about in defense, in border security forces, and in other aviations. These are some of the new challenges which are being taken up. So in brief, what we are saying, that the women have been passing through quite a turmoil in their lives, and there has been no attempt to reduce the gap, and this gap is being, in fact, there are several initiatives which are being taken to reduce this gender gap between men and women so that they all can work together, and no country can really make progress, as we normally say that men and women, they are two wheels of a chariot. Now, if one wheel is not working properly, then the chariot cannot run. comfortably. So keeping that in mind, we find that the concerns which have been expressed so far, they have been really encouraging, and our experience shows that the gender gap has really been reduced, but what we want is real equality and equity between men and women.
Ma'am, the significance of the issue of women is substantial. Would you like to shed the light on the significance of equality for women in the gender equality in general?
Well, see, as I have also mentioned, the equal status is important for a balanced development of the society, a balanced development of the family, and a balanced development of the country. See, take the issue at the social level at home. If girls and boys are not treated equally, what happens? The girls remain far behind. They are not in a position to make as much progress. Sometimes they are not economically independent. If they are not given sufficient education, they would not be economically independent also. And the result is that the handicap with which they go into the in-laws family, it keeps perpetuating. And this is where they are subjected to violence, they are subjected to all other types of discrimination, even in their in-laws family. It is at a much later stage that they are in a position to stand in good stead. And again, the problem is if they are divorced or if they are widowed. Again, they are highly dependent without any economic benefits, without any economic support of them. So, equality is necessary for them to have completely an independent and comfortable life. If they are equal, in fact, they can help more in the development of their family. As you know, that there's a famous saying, you educate a boy in the family, you educate one person. But if you educate a woman, you educate the entire family. So that really shows that the efforts which are made in the development of women, they have a far-reaching benefit. They are extended to the larger social network, to the larger family network than maybe the men. You see, there are two types of employments which one takes into account here. One is that most of the women, for instance, in the rural areas, they work in the agriculture sector. They look after their livestock. They look after many other jobs, for instance, looking after the fields. But then when it comes to their being considered as employed, they are not considered because they are unpaid workers. In census, we have tried to in fact identify such jobs, such work which is unpaid, which is otherwise productive, so that the women could be considered as paid workers or productive workers. Thereby we have been able to improve the statistics on women work. What is really important is, see, when they work, their work should be recognized. If it is recognized as a productive work, then naturally they are the situation improves. In the I tell you one example. See, if you look at the career profile of a woman, say calendar of a woman's work right from morning till evening, she would be the one to get up first of all, maybe in the family, and she works non-stop till late at night, till everybody goes to sleep. This is generally the picture of a household woman, whom we call a housewife. The only time when she might be resting is maybe somewhere in the afternoon for 1 or 2 hours. But then you just look at the profile of a man who is working, goes in the morning for office, comes back in the evening. Generally in the evening he may have no work to do. Basically he is provided all the services to make his life more comfortable, and in the morning also he is provided all services so that he can get ready and go peacefully to the office. But then what happens? The same person is considered to be employed and the woman is considered to be unemployed. This is one of the reasons why most of the women are rated as unemployed.
Acha, ma'am, there is this another aspect of regional disparity is the fact that in terms of male-female sex ratio, especially at a child born at under 5 male-female sex ratio is better in some of the less developed states, for example, say in Chhattisgarh or say in Northeast, and obviously Kerala is a standalone case in very many senses. What do you think is the reason for that?
See, unbalanced sex ratio at birth, basically when we take 0 to 6 age group sex ratio, we have been as demographers more concerned about this sex ratio because of the declining sex ratio in this age group. Now this had been basically attributed to the female feticide, or it is attributed to neglect of female child when born, in fact to infant mortality, female infant mortality rate, and these had been basically on account of what we say son preference in certain societies. Now why there is son preference? There are various reasons. One, of course, could be the cultural reasons, where we feel that the son is the only person fit for looking after the parents in old age, and since he is an earning member, so the parents' dependence is on them. Since the property traditionally had been going to men, and therefore the son was the right heir apparent to the family property. In case of female, all these benefits did not exist, therefore there had been a preference for men, for boys. In the joint families, again there had been additional question that female were not entitled to the property. So if one of the brothers, say, had only daughters and the other had sons, so after the death of this brother, the family would go to the other party. All the sons would be getting their property and not the brother who had only daughters. So that was another reason. But now, as we know, that we have found several legislations against this system. We have given equal rights to the parental property for the girls, and then dowries was another reason, that some of them could afford dowries, some of them could not. In fact, see, there are many issues which one comes across these days. I will not name anyone, but when we talk to the people, some very educated people, coming from, of course, rural areas, backward areas, they say that they have spent, say, one person told me that they have spent 15 lakhs on the marriage of their daughter. So I asked him, what are you going to do when you get married? He says, no, I have also to take the dowry. Now, this person again belongs to the academic community, but still the mindset was there. Mindset is there because everyone, the elders in the family say, we have paid 15 lakhs, so we have to recover 15 lakhs from the girl who comes to our family. So I said, why don't you protest? He says, how can I protest? Because they have lent the money, they have borrowed the money, so they have to pay it. So I said, somewhere this has to be broken. This vicious circle has to be broken. So somebody has to take the leap. But there are some people who are coming forward, but then there are others who are still bound by the tradition. So once you have that dowry system, then you feel a bit hesitant. So we are trying to overcome all this. We have been able to reduce the gap between girls and boys in this regard. But still, we are so bound by social cultural norms that we are still suffering on account of this.
Okay. Dear friends, we have had this engaging discussion with Professor Nangia. We hope that with our discussion you have been enlightened and you have had been able to understand the concept of gender equity and equality in some better terms. On that note, we would like to thank Professor Nangia to coming to our show and delivering this wonderful lecture. And thank you, dear friends, for watching our show. Stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you.